if you and I both put the same query into ChatGPT, we are going to get the same result out of those links. Whereas if you and I did that search on Google, we would go to different pages. That is a like flattening and concentration of information. If I was a marketer right now, I would be terrified.
Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast that explores how AI is changing journalism, media, and content creation. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people building how the business of news will work in the future. I'm excited this week to talk to Dr. Jonathan Roberts. Jonathan is the Chief Innovation Officer at Dotdash Meredith, home of such storied media brands as People, InStyle, and Investopedia. The company's always been very data-driven. Just one example, it has its own ad tech product called Cipher, that's D/Cipher, which provides a way for advertisers to target ads in a world without cookies. Obviously, we're still waiting for that world, but Cipher shows just how willing Dotdash is to get out ahead of disruptive forces. Enter AI. It's arguably the biggest disruptive force the media has ever seen, and it's shaking up the entire model of how people get information on the internet. Dotdash jumped on AI early as a partner to OpenAI, and it's used that partnership to the max. Not only does it benefit from preferred placement in ChatGPT searches, but it also works closely with OpenAI on audience data. That's allowed Dotdash to better personalize reader experiences on its websites, all without compromising the quality of its content. Jonathan and I talk about how Dotdash Meredith is turning the rise of AI into an opportunity, even while all these AI chatbots are making the world of internet commerce a very dicey place to be. We also ponder what will happen to the media in a future where most internet traffic is done by agents. Stay tuned to the end for that. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and if you do, I'd encourage you to share it with a friend or a colleague, and I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing to the Media Copilot newsletter if you haven't already. The link's in the show notes. And if you're if you're a journalist, media executive, or PR professional, I'd love it if you check out mediacopilot.ai for specialized courses on how to use AI tools to automate your specific workflows, craft and enhance your content, and really just work smarter. Okay, now here's my conversation with Jonathan Roberts of Dotdash Meredith. Jonathan, welcome to the Media Copilot.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Awesome. So I'm really excited to talk to you. Honestly, given your background, I'd honestly love to go down like a string theory rabbit hole or something and talk about the Higgs field in the early universe. But we're not here to talk about that. We're both media guys. We're both knee deep in this thing called AI and how it's changing the business. But that said, I'd still like to understand a little bit more about your background, how it informs what you're doing now. You know, you have this great title of Chief Innovation Officer for one of the biggest names in online media. And it's one of these companies that honestly seems to have cracked the science of this in terms of connecting people with information better than most. So tell me a little bit about your background, and why the business of media and working at a place like Dotdash Meredith seemed attractive to you.
Yeah, so before I was over at Dotdash Meredith, I was a research physicist for a decade. So I worked on dark matter and cosmic rays for 10 years. And then I jumped ship over to the media side around 10 years ago, in the very early days when this was a much, much smaller company. So in those days, it was about.com. We were part of IAC. IAC had just bought the company from the New York Times. And we were about 180 people based in Times Square. Now we are a little under 4,000 people all across the
Wow.
country. We have 48 different brands, properties, publications. We're the biggest print publisher in the world. We're the biggest publisher, definitely in the States, one of the biggest in the world. We reach about 30 million people a day just through the websites online, let alone all the other ways people discover us. So it got big. It got properly big. It's the world's first kind of platform scale publisher. And as a scientist by training, right, media executive now, um, it's an interesting question because a lot of what attracted me to the company early was seeing this huge national and international reach. We could see exactly what everybody was reading every day. And because we're not a company that tells you what to read so much, like people tell us. So you've got millions of people a day coming to all of this content because that is what is top of mind for them. Right? We're helping
Mhm.
them with a need that they have. And so it gives you this like very clean senses of interest of the entire country. And we had this data going right back to January 1st, 2000. So one of the first things I did was build a historical chart that shows literally the growth of the internet, right? Like,
Mhm.
which is wild, right? You can ask the questions, what were people interested in on September 12th, 2001, right? You can see the birth
Wow.
and the death of the palm top, right? The BlackBerry. Like you
Mm.
saw that, like that had a massive impact on the media landscape for a moment, right? You can like see the emergence of the iPad, and but you could also see these like big cultural shifts happening.
And
Um,
social media, I'm sure, was a very
Social media
influential
had
sign.
a huge impact, and obviously we've through my time here, I've had lots of different titles. I ran our health business through the pandemic. I ran our financial publishing through the financial crash at the beginning of the pandemic. And then as we've become Dotdash Meredith, we've had this combined entity after we did the Meredith acquisition in 2021. We've kind of got this unparalleled view into to what's going on in the world and what help people are needing and how that's evolving day over day, year over year. Then throw into that AI, and it's we're not short of things that need thought, care, attention, focus. Like chief innovation officer is a
Mhm.
wonderfully fluffy title. What it really means is like whenever something's weird or broken or unusual, it generally lands on one of my teams to think through it.
Well, weird, unusual, and arguably broken app descriptions for AI and sort of what's happening with the information ecosystem for sure. What has been the company's, I guess, relationship with AI? Obviously, AI was a different thing before November 2022, and now that was such a huge pivot point for what just the world and thinks about it, but also how media brands sort of think about it and also leverage it, right? So, give me that sort of given that we're talking about timelines and curves and whatever else, like what was that inflection point like, and then what has happened since then in a sort of a broad sense of how the company's approaching and using AI.
Yeah. Prior to November 2022, we used to just call those kinds of tools natural language processing or machine learning. Right. We hadn't really all started using large language models at that point. Um, so we always had a data science team. We've also had a research team. Like we always use a lot of math and science to understand kind of what's going on in the world and what's working, what's not working, how to react to things. Um, Post November 2022, actually, fun story. We were in Vegas for an IEC offsite, and we had a surprise fireside chat on the last morning, and the surprise fireside chat was Sam Altman. Right, so this was like the day after ChatGPT launched. He demoed in a very small room to a very few people GPT-4. Right, so we saw
Wow.
GPT-4 in
Okay.
November of
Yeah.
2022, and we all kind of walked out there like, "Oh, the world just changed. Okay, let's go." So
That's
that was
interesting
kind
that
of
it was almost less the chat gpt moment and more what was happening next
yeah,
that was spooking you guys. Interesting.
yeah, and uh, it was really interesting to kind of see the vision at that point, and some of that came true. A lot of it didn't,
Hmm.
because the prediction game is hard even for someone with a viewpoint like Sam. Um, but from that point on, we knew we had to have a perspective. We had to understand this, and we had to get into the weeds on it. So, fast forward a year and a bit later, we're the first U.S. publisher to do a deal with OpenAI, right? And
Nice.
so we
Yeah.
got into the weeds, and the deal structure is really a partnership structure, which is an important difference. And the three pieces I think are key. Obviously, there was a payment for training, right, as part of that deal.
Sure.
And I think it's nice. It's a decent chunk of money. We're a very big business. This is not make or break money on any scale. Like we're a large, growing, very profitable publisher. It's more the principle of if you train on our content, you owe us money for doing so, right? We provided you a service, whether or not you talked to us when you did the training. But if you train on our
Hmm.
data, that is worth money. There is a economic relationship that should exist. The second piece, arguably even more valuable, I mean, long term for sure more valuable, is when you use and cite our content, or when our content is used in providing information,
Hmm.
it needs to be meaningfully attributed,
Mm.
right? And we cut this deal before any of these kind of retrieval augmented generation user experiences exist, right? So when you go to search GPT, for example, and there is a citation against the paragraph about where that
Right.
information came from, right? A year and a half ago, everyone just said, oh, build a bigger language model. You'll never need to cite its sources. It just knows, right? It just knows everything. It's omnipresent
Hmm.
and omnipotent. What we now know is large language models hallucinate, which is just a very polite way of saying they lie, right? Excellent piece of marketing, right? And we haven't cracked it.
Make mistakes if we want to be charitable to the
No,
machine.
literally,
Yeah.
literally make things up, right?
Right.
Without real time information or factual information to source from,
Right.
they are a fiction writer, not a researcher.
That's
And you
true.
can use them in either mode.
Yeah, there's different layers to it certainly, but sometimes you could argue they get confused, and sometimes they should know better, and that they should just refuse to answer because they don't know. But for some reason, they decide to give you something made up instead of the thing,
Well,
instead of
this
saying no.
there's an important point here because there's a certain amount. Like, it's very, very, very easy to put human characteristics on things that are very good at pretending to or providing output that looks like it's a human.
Right.
It's not making a mistake, right? It's not saying one thing when it should say another. It's providing the most likely next set of words. So in all
Yeah.
language that has
Good
been
point. Good
provided on the
point.
internet,
Agreed.
it's giving you the average next answer. And I think if you've ever taught a class of undergrads, the average answer and the right answer are two quite different things, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to have it in like, it's not a bug, it's actually a feature. If you
Yeah. I
ground it
hear
and say,
you.
from this information, give me an answer, and there's no answer in the document, it will say, I do not know. So internally, we got very excited when we realized that grounding on our own content, we could get it to say, I don't know. Once these
Hmm.
systems got to that point, it's like, okay, now we actually have a chance to make this thing reliable and useful.
Cool. So then what's the third aspect? You talked about the training data, the inference of the content. So what's the third aspect to the deal that you mentioned?
Yeah, so the training data, we got citations when they use our content. The third piece is co-development, right?
Mm,
We're a large language business, right? We have over 1 million pieces of content, over 1 billion words of content. So these tools are on the surface like built for publishers, right? And built for publishers
sure.
to do things. And so we have actually dug really deep with them into a way to really understand what our users, our readers need when they come to our content and help, honestly, just make the advertising much, much more relevant. So we have a tool we built called the Cipher. This understands from the content you're reading what you are trying to do right now. That was really powerful before AI, but obviously with AI and with a much deeper understanding of the content, you can get to a much deeper understanding of the reader. So we rolled that out. We switched the architecture over onto the AI kind of backbone with OpenAI in fall of last year. It runs in over half our direct deals. It outperforms any kind of creepy identity based targeting. We guarantee that it does incredibly well. And what
Nice.
we've actually done, and this just came out last week, we use this not just to map our own content, but also to map the broader premium web so that we can take this really high performant version of targeting and bring that premium not just to us as a publisher, but to bring that premium out of other premium publishers.
So let me zero in on what you sent there. Like it outperforms everything. What does that mean? Like, are you talking about audience experiences here? Because I think this is really fascinating. Because the other aspects of the deal, while I think get a lot of headlines, I talk about them too, about training data and inference, and like what are these what's the fair deal? What's the copyright question going to do that? I'm interested. Like we could talk about that, but actually, like this aspect, I think is under covered, which is that now that you're a partner with a major AI company, like how are you using that to enhance, both your product and audience experiences, right? So what does that mean, performance, and really take it apart in like every aspect of it? I mean, are we talking personalization? Are we talking about just engagement, et cetera? How are you leveraging this partnership to just do better at all the things you do.
Yeah. The the underpinning problem here is a familiar one, and it's kind of a recommendation problem or a personalization problem, right? How do you give somebody something that isn't just the best thing for anyone, which is really the best thing for nobody, right?
Right.
And is in fact like the best thing for you, right? And this question of like, how do I get for you the best thing for you is a really interesting challenge. So it's not an AI challenge per se, but it's something that AI and LLMs make tractable and make possible in a new way, right? So
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. We know if you're a financial company trying to sell somebody a mutual fund and you line that content, that ad, that offering up against Investopedia's content on mutual funds, this is not rocket science. Like, this is not that hard. Those people are looking to do something. You have the product. Great.
Hmm.
Line them up. Go. But that never scales, right? There's only so many people at any moment reading about the problem that your product is the solution to, right? What we've
Sure.
done with Decipher is that we understand that those people reading about mutual funds actually overlay with a bunch of other concepts and needs, right? And so with the OpenAI tech, we know that the concepts, the underlying kind of driving concepts are somebody's a low risk investor, long term planning, overlaps significantly with like retirement planning and kind of fiscal stability. And so that gives us a view not just within a finance site, but it also overlays into our home sites, into real simple for financial planning tips. And then we actually add to that a lot of user behavior that we've seen over the course of last year. We had over 10 billion visits to our business last year. So we can say, oh, actually, those people are also interested in going on cruises, and they also have disposable cash at that point to put somewhere. They're also interested in gardening, right? This is the drive
Hmm.
having better homes, gardens, and travel and leisure in the portfolio. They're interested in nice wine. They like cooking nice cuts of meat, right? Again, I'm not making this up. This just comes from
Yeah.
looking at 10 plus billion people visit all of our sites, and you can start to make these correlations, build these kind of behavioral profiles. And it's not to
Yeah.
say, oh, because you did this over here, I'm going to track you across our sites. That's not what's going
Hmm.
on. I'm saying that we have learned from seeing the entire country come through all of our sites that if you are interested in going on a Cunard cruise in the Med, you are very, very likely to be in market for something like a mutual fund or a robo-advising fund. Um, if you're looking at content around having a new puppy, you are very interested in stain cleaning, right?
Hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
these correlations exist. With OpenAI, what we've been able to do is take that at the kind of topic level, the level I'm kind of talking about now, and boil that down to the page and the paragraph and the image, and also then extend it outside our walls to take what we've learned across Dotdash Meredith and actually extrapolate that and understand user intent across the entire premium web without having to use any identity.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Look, I get the what you're talking about. It's less about the tracking and more about almost the map you're putting in front of every individual, which is going to be different based on what you know. That's really cool. It's and I imagine this sort of manifests in thinking about the kinds of, I guess, KPIs or whatever that make editors in chief happy, or and content chief content obviously thinking about like more engagement. You have more um brand crossover for a big company like Dotdash Meredith. You have like, okay, so you might have some folks that, well, I guess, what's a brand, travel and leisure versus people, or and everything in between. And initially a lot of like what content would sort of cross over might not be entirely obvious, but then when you sort of have that map, it's much clearer, even on an individual basis. Like, so I guess, like, how does
Yeah,
that sort of manifesting in sort of the on the business side?
I think the key thing that comes out of this is we've proven that good content drives better outcomes and therefore drives better business value, right? Like, if you live in a world where advertising is all kind of creepy retargeting, cookie targeting,
Hmm.
then if you write a great piece of content, right, if you publish an amazing piece of journalism, or if you publish a pretty thin piece of clickbait, and you get the same number of people reading the content, the ad market believes that audience is worth the same because they've already priced them out from what they've tracked from them over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So there's no incentive towards quality in a cookie retargeting digital market. What we've proven is better content drives better outcomes. So if you write better
Mm.
content, it will be worth more, right? And when you can get back to a world of publishing where better content drives better outcomes and drives more value, then there's now a premium on the content, right? And
Yeah.
that literally like changes the like investment profile in quality content, which is great for the editor in chief, great for the CFO, great for the business, right? And so we've been able to really drive a significant growing publisher. Like we had a great year last year. That's not the narrative around the internet.
Right. Yeah.
Off the back of this discovery and really scaling it up.
Well, everybody wants that narrative though, and what you just said just sounds like music to the ears of, all the journalists listening. Can you incentivize for better content? Because that's what everyone wants to do. But I guess the question that immediately comes to mind is like, can only a Dotdash Meredith do this with its resources, with its many brands that span many different demographics? What is there? Are there lessons here for smaller publishers, mid-sized publishers? How can they sort of apply this approach, this mindset to what they're doing?
Um, we learned this when we were about.com and we were 180 employees and we were very broken. So it's like it can be applied at all scales. But look, we brought on and picked up and acquired a number of publications over the years. We bought Investopedia, we bought Brides from Condé Nast, we bought Simply Eats and Serious Eats and Simply Recipes before
Mhm.
we became Dotdash Meredith with the Meredith acquisition. In each of those cases, this playbook worked of
Mhm.
better ads, better content, faster sites, like just getting down to our core of building a better publisher, right? All of these things are not new things in the world, right? Fast
Mhm.
sites, great content, no bad ads doesn't feel like a mysterious playbook. But historically, it's been hard to do because you have to take a bet, right? That
Right.
if you do that, you will make more money. And we took that bet dozens of times, and we spent $2.7 billion on the bet with Meredith, and it worked. Um, the trick is that playbook works great, and then AI comes and flips the table on how content and information as an economy works. So we have to adapt that to the world we're in.
Well, does AI then change that incentive structure you were talking about, right? And this is something I've written about a few times, but it is, I'll admit, to kind of mostly, I wouldn't necessarily say it's theoretical, but it's also a lot of this needs to be built because it's so new. Which is to say, as more and more people get their information from these portals, whether it's a Perplexity or a Chat GPT search or what have you, it becomes more relevant to optimize content for those portals, obviously. Maybe not obviously, because the click through, as which we didn't really dive into, isn't great. But I think there's obvious reasons to want to sort of place an SEO for chatbots, and we can definitely talk about that. But the point I generally make is that if these engines are optimizing for the quality you're talking about, which is to say, oh, we need stuff that is comprehensive, it's fair, it's bringing new information or unique perspectives to this, and we used to call that good journalism, right? And so if you're doing good journalism, presumably you're going to be surfaced in these, and then if there's the right economic and incentive structure, that'll sort of not quite solve the problem, but hopefully be directionally better than what we used to have. What do you think of that perspective? Is that going to be some version of this future? And what are some forces? And I can definitely think of some right away that could maybe stymie that. But just broadly, what do you think of that?
Yeah, look, we're in the very early days of this. I know everything feels like there's a new release every day and a new headline every day, but we're still right at the very beginning. And a couple of, I think, ways to think about that. This time last year, we assumed stock up everything in the world, and then you never need new information to be able to answer every question everyone in the world would ever answer. Right? That was last year's kind of vision of the future, which meant that the AI companies could throw infinite money at this, and that would be a moat, right? Because nobody could ever follow them down this path because they'd spent so much money to build these models. Now we have a world where every consumer AI product is citing its sources and pulling in real time content. right? So there is a need in the instant to get quality reference content. That
Mm,
went from cut a one-off deal or don't cut any deals and we'll never need publishers ever again to, oh God, we actually need quality content in the instant at that moment in time to make this thing any good.
mhm,
That's a totally different relationship between publishing and AI companies this year than it was last year. I cannot overstate how big that swing is.
mm,
And then the flip side of this is that the LLMs themselves, like the brain of the AI, is rapidly becoming a commodity, right? So
mm.
DeepSeek showed that, shockingly enough, China could build it cheaper and faster. Who knew, right? Um, and so you then ask the
Put it that
question
way.
that if the brain is free, right, if reasoning is cheap and fast, what do you build, right? And
Mhm.
that means that OpenAI and Google and but also Perplexity and Claude and all the other companies out there really is no moat. And Google said this years ago, right? There's the famous like we have no moat paper from Google, but it's explicitly and clearly true now. The
Mm.
third piece, just to quickly uh, cover this, is in a world where you need real time access to content, you have to question whether or not you just let the AI systems consume your content, right?
Right.
And that is a choice that we make. Up until now, you basically write in a file in your site, please don't scrape me, right? And then they do so anyway because they're ignoring it. But there are many more ways to throw up much larger, much more significant walls. And when the AI systems need real time access to quality content, I see no reason why you would not stop that and then
Mhm.
do a deal like the one we have with OpenAI, right? Because when they're able to tap into Travel and Leisure and Better Homes and Gardens and People Magazine and Investopedia, what they're producing is better for the user than if they can't
Right,
access
for
that,
sure.
right? There is a value to that content. And so that's a market that needs to be made, a market that needs to be set. It's a market that is wildly immature at the moment.
Yeah. What I feel like one of the downsides to this approach vis-a-vis the open web is like we're used to Google indexing everything and giving us what presumably is like the best. And again, there's not, there's issues with Google and whatever business decisions they make, but everything is kind of on a fair playing field. Whereas now with licensing and the other side of it, which is the litigation, what's appearing in these particular engines will be different, right? Like what the results that you get out of OpenAI, and there's been now some data about this, are going to be different from what you get out of Perplexity or whatever else, and presumably
Mhm.
Claude now that it's searching the web, and I'm sure maybe we'll see a bunch of deals with them. Um, but that's really weird, isn't it? Like it's kind of almost like some of these companies are sort of picking winners. And I know AI search is fairly nascent now. It's a drop in the bucket compared to traditional search. But then again, Google's one of these players, and surely they have designs here too. So I don't know. I guess how do we it's almost like circling back to what we talked about where we started at the beginning, which is like connecting the audience with the right information that's best for them. um how can this play out in such a way that becomes the answer? I don't know. Again, we're at the very beginning of it, but do you at least sort of get a sense we're going in a good direction?
And we need to relearn all the lessons that were learned at the beginning of search, which is
Mm,
you need to understand what a trusted source is, right? And the all of us, like consumers, people who use these tools, we all know, right? And
yeah,
one of the really valuable things that Google did early on was they trained their system on user behavior, right? If users liked and trusted a source, then that generally got more showtime, more airtime, right? Um,
true.
that relies on giving people options and choices that they can pick from. The problem with these AI systems is they're winner takes all, right? Search is such a powerful paradigm because you give people 10 blue links, right? And then they can pick the one they want. But they tried I'm feeling lucky, which was the one answer, and it didn't work because what was inside somebody's head was different, whether or not the query was the same. So people would be choosing between different sources for good, real, differentiated reasons, right? Because the choice was in the person. What's
Hmm.
happened now is you get a list of search results behind the scenes, and the AI system is making the choice for you. It does not know what's in your brain. So rather than there being a option to pick different paths, this is flattening that whole decision making funnel, and every AI system is going to make the same. Like, if you and I both put the same query into ChatGPT, we are going to get the same result out of those links. Whereas if you and I did that search on Google, we would go to different pages. That is a like
Hmm.
flattening and concentration of information. If I was a marketer right now, I would
Hmm.
be terrified. Because if I ask the question, what's the best hotel chain on Google, I get a long list of different things. And as a reader, I can consider and make choices. If I go to
Right.
ChatGPT, it's going to tell me Hyatt or Hilton or or any of these hotel chains, but it's going to give me one answer. That is taking
Hmm.
away any kind of informed consideration or choice, which is, as a publisher, we know the value of giving people choices and helping them educate
Right.
themselves and make a better choice. These LLM systems making that choice for you is bad. Again, that is not a failure of AI. That is a
Hmm.
failure of product and user design, right? User experience design. We know that we can help people make really informed, interesting, differentiated decisions with AI, but a
Hmm.
chatbot is a single answer machine, which is a bad UX. So I think we'll see that UX evolve because I don't think it's a good use case for a lot of questions. Commodity information, fine. When is the Super Bowl? Not a problem. How much water should I drink? Not a problem. But any publisher who's relying on commodity facts as a publishing business shouldn't be in business, right?
Right.
We
Right.
deal with the interesting, complex questions.
Right. And so, yeah, like what you're sort of talking about is almost like this whole new ecosystem around, well, not just commerce, but commerce is obviously a big part of that. And this idea of like, what you said there about the flattening, I don't think people have thought that much about because it's actually counterintuitive, which to say like your journey is different going through Google than say on a chatbot, even though the chatbot is probabilistic and generative, and everyone thinks about it as potentially going in any direction. But if the pattern that emerges is the same generally, like it's going to just keep taking you to the same spot. Um, so I'd love to just ask you about that in terms of like the UX and commerce and stuff. Again, early days, but I've been thinking about this too. Certainly folks who rely on commerce, evergreen content, not doing as well in the AI era. What's the path they could take either for UX or approach that might go in a certain direction? An idea I had was like, I don't know if anyone's even doing this, and you would know better than I would in terms of like surfacing those transactional links within an AI chat, so you don't have to go to the publisher because that seems to be the trend, or is it a better path to that publisher? Um, or I don't know, because like we're seeing this a little bit in Perplexity, right? With their Buy with Pro. So they're getting their own sort of transactional units in there. How is this going to shake out? Where are people going to start doing this stuff? I mean, it's not like, we haven't seen this with Google and flights and whatever, but it just seems like if this is part of your business model, you have to be really worried right now.
Um, I mean, yes, ish. Obviously, we're very focused on it. I wouldn't say we're
Mhm.
worried. I think we've learned a lot of things because we help millions of people a day make shopping choices, right? If you want to understand how to refresh your living room, Better Homes and Gardens is a great place to do it. If you want to get the best travel carry on, travel and leisure, we tested the hell out of this in our testing labs and also in homes across the country, right? We have videos of that testing happening. You can understand who did it and when they did it and what it was like 3 months after they did it, right? We invested a huge amount of time into really going deep into understanding products in the real
Mhm.
world, right? Something that literally AI will never be able to do, right? And we know that people comparison shop and want lots of perspectives, and they want a voice and experience that they trust, and they want to know and see how this thing was tested. All
Mhm.
things that just a faceless chatbot will not do, right?
Right.
So we
Fair enough.
do see we get actually quite a lot of uh, quite a lot of our commerce content surfaces in Search GPT because we're deeply partnered with them, right? We've gone down this
Sure.
path with them. We actually see some of the highest click-through rates from commerce recommendation content to our commerce pages from ChatGPT, which
Interesting.
tells me people don't just want the high level. They like we literally see them digging deep into the content after they've seen the summary view, right?
Hmm.
People want to do research when they're making a purchase, and
Right.
the brand matters. So there is a really valuable position for publisher plus AI in this world, right?
Hmm.
Same way on Apple News, lots of people come across our product recommendations and our product reviews on Apple News, and then they go through and they purchase, and we get a share of that purchase, right? That's our
Hmm.
content helping inform the president to make a better decision. If an AI company takes our content and makes a recommendation, and then they take a share of the purchase, then they're taking our value and not giving it back. That's
Hmm.
obviously not okay. But somebody gets a deep and thorough understanding with an AI plus our commerce content that makes a really informed choice. That seems like a very good thing for users. Then the question is just how do we carve up the revenue that is generated by that, right?
Hmm.
That's like there is clearly a better future here. Right?
Yeah.
We have like millions of words of research under the hood that never makes it onto the internet, just sitting in Google Sheets from our testing. We did a proof of concept where we took that and put it into a workflow with ChatGPT and started doing product recommendations. For like, I have a niece; she does a lot of modern dance. I don't know what makeup to get her for her Christmas, but she
Hmm.
really wanted makeup for Christmas. So I was like, great. Hey, we've done a huge amount of makeup testing. Given all of this library of research that we have, hey, ChatGPT, go read all of our testing data and see if you can give me some better recommendations for my niece's Christmas present. Was that better than what I got out of Rufus, Amazon's one? Yes, light years better, right? Because
Nice.
it's clear, sourced, human, first person perspective,
Right.
quantitative and qualitative research at the SKU level. That is a better product for users.
Hmm.
How we deploy that, where that gets deployed, how it gets hooked into ChatGPT, who gets paid for it, none of that has been figured out yet by anyone.
Right.
But if an AI company comes along and says, "Oh, just read your content, help people make a purchase
Yeah.
decision, we'll keep the money," obviously, no.
Yeah. 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 Nice. That's very cool. Looking forward to that future. So just to wrap up a bit on the future. So like, give me your perspective on like what is to come um, in the next couple years. What this sort of how things might shake out. You know, obviously we don't know how the courts or whatever are going to shake out. Everyone now the AI companies want the government to give them free reign over some, at least some degree of copyright because of national security. Agents are going to be everywhere, I'm told, and that's going to be a big change. So that now the internet's going to have to be designed for bots crawling on behalf of us rather than us ourselves. I mean, maybe we'll see some of that. I don't know. Um, game out a couple of these scenarios. Like, where do you see, both how people are going to be using the internet for the things that Dotdash Meredith is so good at, and then how what are you going to be offering up to satisfy them, give them the information they need?
Yeah. Um, let's cut the agent thing first. There's a lot of buzz around AI not just being a writer and a summarizer and a researcher, but also a doer, right?
Hmm.
So actually being able to go around the internet taking actions rather than just pulling in information and summarizing help a person take actions. Um, obviously, that is hugely transformative once that comes to life. I would say that the problem there is as much a trust issue as everything else, right? A lot of the researching like hallucination challenge is that it can get 80% accurate, 90% accurate, 95% accurate. That's fine when you're a human cross-checking the information that's coming back, right? It's less fine when it's got your credit card,
Hmm.
right? So there's a I think a quality bar to hit, and then a trust in that quality bar to go hit, which will take time. So this
Yeah.
is obviously the year to like test and learn and try things out and build systems that can do it. And then next year we'll probably start to see some real use cases come out there. Um, But on the kind of LLM side, where it is being a researcher, it is summarizing, it is moving words around, it's helping with these kind of workflows or providing custom use cases, like this kind of more classic LLM stuff that we've seen in the last year or so, those are starting to become much more mature now, right? Companies are in doing like Series A's now, right, where they've got a real business model solving a real specific problem with AI. I think what we're seeing is those companies are not necessarily AI companies. They are companies that solve a particular valuable problem that they can now solve because of some AI capabilities, right? So they're problem-specific companies enabled by AI rather than them being like AI companies, right?
Mm,
And that means AI becomes the supporting cast member, not the headliner, right? And I think that's really interesting because you're going to start to see net new interesting companies that just couldn't have existed before, but they're interesting because of what they're doing, not how they're doing it,
mm,
right? And for us, I mean, Decipher is a perfect example of this.
yeah.
We've been doing content-based targeting with ads for years. It's performed great. This is an accelerant. What this enabled us to do that we couldn't do before was go run this across the entire open web and bring a premium to the rest of publishing, right? That's the threshold this allowed us to cross. Is Decipher on the open web, Decipher Plus, an AI product? No. It's a wide-scale performant ad business, right? That allows us to unlock our premium publishing, allows to really bring back the value to the open web and allow the open web to scale and to grow in a way that has been challenging over the last couple of years, and allows us to kind of compete with some of the big players in the space. We can do that because AI helps us. So you'll see these kind of new capabilities where we're talking about the problem, not about the AI. And I think we are going to have a bit of a reckoning because the belief that you could just throw infinite money at this and build a world-beating company that wouldn't need to compete because you'd have such a big moat is just
Mm.
untrue, right? These foundational models are are becoming commodities. So it switches into who has the best product, who has the best user understanding, who has user trust and faith, and who has unique data, right? And once you bring data back in as a differentiating thing, if you can create something that is uniquely valuable to your users and then you can add reasoning to it, you have a thing. And publishers create unique things for their audiences all the time, right? So when reasoning is a commodity, why can't you build something better than Perplexity, who's trying to solve all problems for everyone, right? Just solve the
Nice.
one problem for your users, right? You should be able to do that much more efficiently now than ever before.
I like to end on that note. It's nice and optimistic. It's all about the information, and that's what the publishers have. Jonathan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving us the time and the perspective.
No, thanks for having me on. It's certainly not going to be dull.
All right. See you again soon. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Jonathan Roberts, Chief Innovation Officer of Dotdash Meredith. If you like what you heard, please just take a minute to leave a rating or review for the Media Copilot in your podcast app. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter and check out mediacopilot.ai for our classes on AI for journalists, PR professionals, and communicators. Be seeing you in the future.